So this is part 3. And we've covered the earlier verses, so we just jump in at verse 7 in Matthew 25. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. So those that haven't been with us for the whole series, the parable that Jesus tells about these 10 virgins that are planning to be at the wedding, unfortunately there's a delay and the bridegroom doesn't come. And it gets later and later at night, and so they fall asleep, all 10 of them fall asleep. And then finally at midnight, the message goes out that the bridegroom is coming. And that's when this verse takes place. Then all those virgins arose, all 10, and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said unto the wise, Give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. So apparently in the story there was a lamp that had some oil in it, and then there was an extra container that had oil so that they could refill. And this time we see that the 5 wise, foolish virgins, they didn't have any extra oil. All they had was in their lamp to begin with. And so they asked the wise virgins if they would share. But the wise virgins were not able to share because this is not about oil per se. It's a spiritual lesson. And there was a lack in the spiritual life of the foolish virgins. And the wise virgins were not able to pass their spiritual life to them. Therefore, there was no answer except trying to get ready, crash course. But unfortunately, it was too late. Now, this is such a valuable lesson because I don't know how many people are procrastinators, but it's probably at least 98% of human nature. That we wait till the last minute, and then we hope we can get ready. And some of us, we're always a little bit late because we started too late to prepare. And so we're rushing like everything, trying to get prepared, but we didn't start early enough, and so we're late. Well, that's a forgivable habit in most circumstances, but not when it comes to heaven. It cannot. There's a time when the procrastinator is going to lose out. So God is trying to tell us in this situation, you need to conquer that in your spiritual life. Don't put off. This terrible situation they now see to be the consequence of their own carelessness. So these foolish virgins, when they wake up and they find out it's midnight and they don't have any oil, and they realize, it's our own fault that we don't have this oil. And they plead with the 5 wise virgins for a supply of oil. But the waiting 5 with their freshly trimmed lamps have emptied their vessels. So this account gives us the idea that they poured it all in the lamp. They didn't have anything more they could give. It was all gone. They have none to spare. And another comment on this, they had neglected to prepare themselves to meet the bridegroom. Now this one explains what is it that keeps people from getting ready for that moment. Those who loved selfish enjoyment, ease, and indulgence. So many people, there's a lot of things in this world that people can do that, as was mentioned in Sabbath school, they will be a blessing seemingly for a while. But they soon give out, and now we don't like it anymore, and we see the harm that it does. And so those foolish virgins had involved themselves in selfish enjoyment. Selfish enjoyment is things that doesn't do anybody any good. Doesn't do you any good. Doesn't do anybody else any good. It's just passing time. It's entertainment, keeping our mind occupied. Next one it mentions is ease and indulgence. Well, I'd like to have time to study, but I just like to sit around and do nothing. And so the time that should have been spent on getting ready passed by, and they didn't get ready. Indulgence has to do with a lot of things that aren't good for us, and they actually unfit our mind to consider heavenly things, like eating a diet that fogs the brain so that the brain is not able to really enjoy spiritual things or even comprehend spiritual things. And so these foolish virgins had been involved in all these things and have neglected God-giving opportunities and the ennobling things pertaining to the better life, and have bartered away the good and lovely for the superficial interests of the world. So they were busy, they were doing things, but they were not things that would help their spiritual life. And as a result, we're caught off guard here when the announcement went out that the bridegroom had come. It says, they will be in earnest then. Boy, are they going to wish they had not done what they had been doing. That they had done something different, because they really wanted to be in heaven. They didn't want to miss out on heaven, but they missed out because they ended up spending their time in the wrong direction. When the realities of eternity open before them and the scales fall from their eyes, a frantic cry will be raised. Give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. So they're desperate now. They don't have hardly any time at all, and character cannot be built in a moment. It cannot have a crash course for character. It has to be built step by step, piece by piece, decision by decision, of what we're going to look at, what we're going to participate in, how we're going to spend our time. That is what determines our character over a period of time. And so this parable Jesus gave us to try to wake up those that are putting off or are getting too involved in the things of this world rather than the things that will get them ready to enjoy. When you think about it, what is 100 million years compared to 50 to 90 years on earth? I mean, they're, as some people have the phrase, it's a no-brainer to make a decision. What is the thing that is best to have? Well, God has wonderful plans for us, and now is the time when we are to be getting ready. By what we read, what we look at, what we're involved in, all of that determines whether or not we end up as a wise virgin or a foolish virgin when the cry goes out. Here's another interesting application. just this state of things will be realized in O. I'm not sure where O was. Might be Ohio. But anyway, there were some Seventh-day Adventists that were not considering that they were foolish virgins. The anguished sufferers will wildly appeal to relatives and friends for prayer and comfort in that fearful hour. So in looking ahead, these individuals were kind of careless right now. They weren't really preparing, but it was seen that in the future, they're going to call up their friends and say, please pray for me. And they're going to be desperate when they notice the word wildly appeal to all their relatives and all their friends, please pray for me. But it was too late. Those prayers had gone up for the foolish virgins before, and now it's too late for the prayer to do any good. But these will be powerless to redeem the brother whom they helped. Now this is really sad. Whom they helped to fasten in chains of unbelief and darkness. So the people, the other members, caused the lack of preparedness on the part of these members, and therefore they were headed to this great disappointment that they would wait too late and then they would appeal, but nothing could be done then. The account goes on with verse 9 in Matthew 25. But the wise answered, saying, not so, lest there be not enough for us and you, but go ye rather to them that sell and buy for yourselves. The problem is, it's too late to buy, and it can't take place. But that is the only answer that they can give, because they've poured all the oil they have into their lamps, and there's nothing left for the others. In reading this parable, one cannot but pity the foolish virgins and ask the question, why is it that the wise did not divide their supply of oil? You know, if we just think on a human level, we would think, and it's true, I mean, a Christian should share what they have, right? But that's not the purpose of this parable. But as we make the spiritual application of the parable, we can see the reason. It is not possible for those who have faith and grace to divide their supply with those who have not. Am I able to give anyone the faith that I have? Can you give me the faith that you have? No. Now, maybe if I exercise faith, it will inspire someone to do the same. That part we can do. But if the person never gets inspired and never develops faith, then the time comes, it's too late. The faith cannot be developed then. The same is true of grace. Now, grace is misunderstood. There are two dimensions of grace. One is understood, the other one is not. Everyone understands that when God forgives us, that's grace. And that's a great blessing. When we need forgiveness, to be forgiven. But that's not the way it's used here. Grace here is so that you can conquer your weaknesses of character. God has provided enough grace to conquer everything. And if I conquer, again, I might inspire you to do the same, but if you don't conquer, I can't give you my grace that I got. And you can't give yours to me. And so that's the lesson here, that those two things are lacking in the foolish virgins. it is not possible for those who have made a thorough heart work to impart the benefit of this to those who have done but surface work. You know, not all the duties of a pastor are pleasant. And you run the risk of displeasing people. But I felt a burden this week when Lonnie came by. I said, Lonnie, unless God works a miracle, you're not going to make it. And I said, you need to make sure that you're right with Jesus. Because if you don't make it and you're not right with Him, you're going to miss out on a lot. And I wish that all of you would pray with me that He'll do that, because it doesn't look good for his future right now. It is not possible for those who have made a thorough heart work to impart the benefit of this to those who have done but surface work. Now, I mentioned in the beginning, all these people, all these virgins are church members. And so we're not talking about people that don't have any interest in Jesus, but we're talking about this group that have just made surface work, and now they wake up to what they did, and they're wishing it was different, but it's too late. The parable is designed to point out the peril of doing a surface work. Many profess to be Christians, and for a time, their half-heartedness is not discerned. So, you know, people come to church, we interact with them, we can't tell that they're a foolish virgin. The difference between them and those who are truly pious is not made apparent. This parable should awaken solemn reflections. Now, don't forget the sermon I gave last week, because some might become discouraged as you think about your failures. But what I shared last week is just as important as what I'm sharing this week. But it says, this parable should awaken solemn reflections. Which one am I? Am I a wise virgin or am I a foolish virgin? Considering it, we should ask ourselves, and here's some questions that we should ask ourselves. Are we doers of the words of Christ? In other words, what we have read that we're supposed to do, are we doing it? If we are, that means we've had grace, because we can't do it in our own power. So we've received grace to practice what we read. Another question, are we building on the rock? A reference to another parable where some people built on the sand and some people built on the rock. The rock, of course, is Jesus, and so we don't want to build on the sand. Are we, in our probationary time, making our calling and election sure? You know, there's one thing about Jesus. If we ask Him to reveal anything that would hinder us from being a wise virgin, He'll tell us. He'll point it out. But if we don't ask, we might go on being fooled about our condition. We should not soothe our consciences in expectation of heaven when we are not bearing the distinguishing characteristics of the Christian life. So if we notice that we're exhibiting an unchristlike character, the very first thing we need to do is ask forgiveness, and the next thing we need to do is ask for power to conquer that. And this is what the wise virgins were doing, but the foolish virgins, they didn't bother that. They didn't worry about that. And they fell again. And maybe they felt bad for a little while, but they didn't do anything to change. And so they kept on with those characteristics that cannot enjoy heaven. That's why Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5, says, examine yourselves whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves how that Jesus Christ is in you, except ye be reprobates? In other words, we're either reprobates or Jesus is in us. And he's saying, examine yourself to see which one is leading you and guiding you. Verse 10 now of Matthew 25 says, and while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Now, they should have thought about what happened in Noah's day. Noah preached for 120 years. And he told the people that a flood was coming. And some of them believed for a while, but since it didn't happen real soon and people were ridiculing, they eventually gave it up. And finally, God sent the animals 2 by 2 and the clean animals 7 by 7, and it really shook up the people, but they still didn't go in the ark. And then the door was shut. When the rain started falling, they were beating on the ark and wishing that they could get in that ark. But it was too late. That's the picture that Jesus wanted them to get when he told this parable. Because the same thing is going to happen again. Now, many Christian denominations are telling a lie. They don't probably realize it's a lie, but they're saying that the people who aren't ready now can get ready during the 1,000 years. But this parable says, no, that's not true. There's coming a time when probation closes. And when that door closes, which is not a visible door like the one in Noah's time, when that door closes, nobody changes after that. Everybody stays the way they are. And that's when the wise virgins and the foolish virgins are separated. At that moment when probation closes. This comment says, the time when the great work for man's salvation shall be completed. Now, sometimes that close of probation is misrepresented. God is not going to close the door when somebody is almost there, and the door closes. You may have had that at a store sometime. You wanted to buy something and you knew you were running late, but you were rushing to the store and you got there. They closed the door, locked the door. You can still see them in there working, but you can't get in. No, it's not like that. The way God works is he puts you in circumstances to develop your character one way or the other. And when everybody's character is fully developed, he shuts the door. Because nobody would change sides anyway after that. The coming of the bridegroom here brought to view takes place before the marriage. So the bridegroom comes and then the marriage begins. The marriage represents the reception by Christ of his kingdom. The holy city, the New Jerusalem, which is the capital and representative of the kingdom, is called the bride, the Lamb's wife. That's in Revelation. So, when probation closes, there's something taking place up in heaven. And that is the marriage. And so, when probation closes, we have wise virgins, foolish virgins. The wise virgins, by faith, not in person, but by faith, they go into the marriage in heaven, which takes place between Jesus and the New Jerusalem. But notice it calls it a representative of the kingdom. So The wise virgins are the kingdom, but the New Jerusalem represents the kingdom. They were not to be present in person at the marriage, for it takes place in heaven, while they are upon the earth. The followers of Christ are to wait for their Lord when he will return from the wedding. That's in Luke 12, verse 36. So when Jesus actually appears on earth, he's returning from the wedding to collect the wise virgins and take them to live in that New Jerusalem. When the foolish virgins reached the banqueting hall, they received an unexpected denial. The master of the feast declared, "I know you not." They were left standing without, in the empty street, in the blackness of night. Does that sound kind of depressing to you? It sure does to me. I wouldn't want to be one of those foolish virgins. Now is the time to become a wise virgin. Let none follow the example of the foolish virgins and think that it will be safe to wait until the crisis comes before gaining a preparation of character to stand in that time. It will be too late to seek for the righteousness of Christ when the guests are called in and examined. He told another parable of the marriage, and he had all these guests, and when they came in, they were examined. Same idea. Jesus was very concerned about this subject because he knew what our natural characteristic is, to put things off, to think we will catch up later, to think we will be able to make it somehow in spite of the fact we didn't put the time in. And so he told us all kinds of ways to really get ready. Then we go to verses 11 to 13 in Matthew 25. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered and said, "Verily I say unto you, I know you not. Watch therefore, for ye know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh." And I found this sentence saddest of all words that ever fell on mortal ear are those words of doom, "I know you not." Can you think of anything worse as a church member to have those words spoken? I can't think of anything worse. They expected to be in. They had gone to church on the right day. They had paid their tithe, and they even gave offerings, and maybe gave shoes to children that needed them. All kinds of things were done, but the heart preparation was not made. And so they expect to get in, but they hear those sad words. This comes as a solemn warning to every church. How many churches? Every church. Showing the danger of those whose works do not correspond to their profession of faith. And when Jesus returns, here is recorded what he's going to tell the foolish virgins in Matthew 7, verses 21 through 23. "Not every one that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven." So those that obey what he said, not in their own power, through the power of Christ, those that do what he said, will not hear those words. "Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have cast out devils? And in thy name done many wonderful works?" And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Now somehow we think that if a person can prophesy, but remember Balaam? He was a prophet, and he lost his way. So we think that if we do these things, we must be in. But it doesn't necessarily mean so. Even casting out devils, very few people are successful at that. But if they don't have the heart relationship and have conquered their weaknesses of character by the grace of God, unfortunately, they are fooling themselves. And they will hear these words, I never knew you. Here's a very important part of our preparation. And more than anything else, this is what prepares the character that goes to heaven, that reflects the character of Christ. Can we educate our sons and daughters for a life of respectable conventionality, a life professedly Christian but lacking his self-sacrifice, a life on which the verdict of him who is truth must be, I know you not. Now, not too many of us here have children that we're raising today. So if we see that we haven't been successful, don't give up in discouragement. But this is what we were supposed to do in raising our children. The many church members and the whole world says the kind of car you drive, the house you live in, and the kind of job you have is what determines your success. And God says, no, that's not what determines it. What determines your success is how much you are willing to sacrifice to serve the world and to take care of the needs of the world. Jesus led the way. There's no way we can sacrifice more than he did. He made the ultimate sacrifice. But as we prepare for eternity, he's looking for people that are willing to sacrifice ultimately everything. Not right now, He tells us when we are to do that. When probation closes, we don't want to have anything left. It needs to be all put in to the finishing of his work. And so this life of self-sacrifice is a key aspect in becoming a wise virgin. It says thousands are doing this. They think to secure for their children the benefits of the gospel while they deny its spirit. So they like the meetings, they like the blessings they get when they live the Christian life. It's a wonderful thing. You get many blessings as a result of it, but they don't want the sacrifice that Jesus gave. Those who reject the privilege of fellowship with Christ in service reject the only training that imparts a fitness for participation with him in his glory. So serving people unselfishly, that's what develops the character that Jesus had. And he's doing that not just when he was here on earth and after he was resurrected for that short time, but that's what he's doing in heaven constantly. He's not doing what he wants to do. He's doing what we need him to do for us. He is constantly exercising sacrifice. Here's a little description of what people will hear in the future. When you doled out the pittance of bread to the starving poor, when you gave those flimsy garments to shield them from the biting frost, did you remember that you were giving to the Lord of glory. This is what we could call tipping God, you know. When people do a service for us, sometimes we give them a little tip. And many, that's what they're doing with God, giving him a tip. All the days of your life, I was near you in the person of these afflicted ones, but you did not seek me. You would not enter into fellowship with me. I know you not. And the last thought I leave with you, but those who have given God only half-hearted service, allowing their lives to be conformed to the ways and practices of the world, will hear the sad words, "Depart from me, I know you not." Is your life really seriously involved in service? Giving is good, and we should do that, but our life needs to be involved in service to help mankind. And the second thing is, as you read, do you find things where you should change from the way the world is to what you ought to be? Are you making those changes? If you are, then you're a wise virgin. And you're making the preparation that ought to be made. But if you're not doing those two things, then you're among the foolish virgins. And one day, if you don't change, you will end up hearing those saddest of all words. I never knew you. And I would really feel bad if anybody in this church ended up in that group when that happened. So that's why I felt I needed to share in great detail this parable. I'm sure we've looked at it in general before, but we've looked at it really carefully this time. And I'm going to pray after our song that God will bless each person here to really get over that bad habit that we all have. I have it too, of procrastination, and really get busy and ask God to help us know how to get involved in service of those that need our service.